Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Welcome back to the residency program series that we're doing here with Texas A&M. I'm Jake Owen. I'm a fourth year medical student, and today we have the privilege of hearing from Dr. Shalabi, who is a resident, a PGY two, wait, three. This is the week where they change over. So PGY two, I think PGY three starting in 2 or 3
Monday.
days. One
Yeah.
day, perfect. Um, and he's at the Baylor Scott and White Temple program in Texas, Temple, Texas. Thanks for coming on the show.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Jake. Always fun coming back to the Texas A&M Derm interest group. I was definitely a lot of us were involved in this when we were med students, so always happy to give back.
That's good. So tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. So my name is it's a long name, Mujahid Shalabi. A lot of people, the med students, the residents, faculty know me as Mojo. I grew up in mainly overseas. So I was born in Puerto Rico, lived in Palestine for about 4.5 years. So I'm originally Palestinian. Then we moved to the States, went to Mississippi for a couple of years, and then Texas for the past 2010. So it's been almost 14, 15 years in Texas. For undergrad, I went to the University of Texas at Dallas, UT Dallas, go Comets. And then for medical school, Texas A&M. And now I'm at Baylor Scott and White Medical Center in Temple. So it's pretty fun. It's been quite the journey. Medicine's a long road, and I don't know. I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel yet, but I'm definitely getting close. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, you're definitely closer than I am. I'm a few years behind you in medical school. So
No.
where did you do or did you do a research year, and where did you do your intern year?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I did not do a research year. Thankfully, I felt like I had enough kind of research as a medical student to apply comfortably. Intern year, I did it at Baylor Scott and White, All Saints in Fort Worth. So I've been in the Baylor Scott and White system for a while because even in medical school, for people don't know, Texas A&M has multiple campuses. So when I did my first year at the Bryan College Station, my last 3 years were in Dallas, and we're affiliated with the Baylor Scott and White or Baylor University Medical Center there downtown Dallas. So I was there for the last 3 years of med school, then 1 year in Fort Worth for my intern year for Scott and White All Saints, and now I'm in Scott and White Temple for my dermatology residency. So it's a good. I
Nice.
mean, it's a Scott and White family. We'll see how it goes.
That's good. You have been in the system a while. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
currently
of
on the
course.
Dallas campus, so I'm
Yeah,
also in the system, you could
it'll be
say.
fun.
So what do you tell us a little bit more about what you like to do just for fun
Yeah,
outside of dermatology?
of course. Yeah. So I'm married. I've been married for 2 years. So my wife.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. So we try to travel when we can. She definitely pushes me out of my comfort zone, which I like. I felt like in med school. I mean, we got married a week before I graduated med school, and so I felt like med school. I know I was like, man, if we got married before I graduated med school, I feel like I would have been more outgoing in med school. But she tries to get me to travel a lot. So we've been to Mexico twice. We've been to Puerto Rico. We try to travel within the states. We watch a lot of TV shows together when she'll make dinner and we sit together and we'll watch shows. We try to go out when we can. As far as outside, my wife and I work out a lot too. Ever since we're engaged, so we try to go to the gym when we can. There's not much to do in Temple. Unfortunately, we drive back to Dallas a lot to see my family and her family. And then for me myself, I play a lot of sports. Not necessarily, soccer was a little less, but more of the volleyball, like sand volleyball. I really dove into that as a med student. And even when I was in Fort Worth, we played like league with my co-resident, my program coordinator, and we won a couple of championship leagues over there, like select teams. And I'm trying to start one in Temple, but it wasn't as easy as doing it, in Fort Worth as a bigger city. But that's what I try to do most of the time. Honestly, dermatology is a lot of studying too. So when I moved to Temple, it was a lot of studying in the beginning.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's awesome that you like sand volleyball. That's more of a unique sport that I
Yeah.
don't hear very often people say.
I'm trying to pick up pickleball too. We'll see how that goes.
Pickleball's fun. That's a good one
Yeah.
too. Um, well, great. Welcome to the show. We're just gonna, yeah, I'll just give a rundown. We're gonna ask the same questions that we ask everyone else. And we're gonna talk about your institution, and then we'll get some insider information about your program. So first, let's start with talking about your institution. Tell us a little bit more about your program in the sense of. I have my notes down here. In the sense of like the name, location, how many clinical sites you have, how many faculty do you have, how many residents do you have, that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. So it's kind of like Jake said in the beginning, transitioning to PGY3 in a couple of days, so it's a little shifty. Same thing. So our program is Baylor Scott and White Medical Center. That's not so I'm shifting, and so is some affiliation with the hospital. So we were affiliated with Texas A&M. We technically are still are, but starting July 1st, the affiliation switches to Baylor College of Medicine, which is the Houston. It's a medical school in Houston. So that's shifting. Um, we're also shifting in terms of residency numbers. My class is the last class of 3 residents. So it's myself and 2 other co-residents. And so the incoming class on Monday is going to be 4 residents. The people that matched 3 months ago or 3.5 months ago in March was 4 residents too. So when I graduate, the full class is we're looking at my program is going to be 12 residents, and that's after I graduate, since we're the last class of 3. And that would be, I would say, the summer of 2026. We'll get the full cohort of 2026. As far as clinical sites, it's the main 3 clinical sites are going to be our Baylor Scott and White Dermatology Clinic, which is within that campus of the hospital. It's not in the hospital. We have our own building, so parking is really nice. You just park in the building and walk in. We have the VA Medical Center, so Central Texas VA, I think, and that one's actually like a mile down the road, so it's like a 3-minute drive. And then there's the hospital, which is like, the clinic is within hospital grounds, so the hospital is right there. You can, it's a 2-minute, 1-minute drive into the hospital. Those are the 3 main clinical sites. Now Scott and White did open a new west campus for their pathology, so as a first year and a couple of times as a upper year or a chief, you'll have a half day derm path in the afternoon, and that one's about what 8-9 minutes. So it's a pretty easy drive. And honestly, having derm path is nice. It's a relaxing afternoon because you'll go there, you just read slides with the fellow, and you'll read slides with the derm path fellowship director, Dr. Fernandez. He's really good.
Oh, that's great. Well, that kind of answered the next question I had for you was what fellowships you guys associated with? Do you guys have any?
Yeah, so our only fellowship that we have is dermatopathology. We don't have peds, we don't have Mohs, we don't have cosmetics, which are like the main kind of four in dermatology.
So how many faculty do you have? I mean, you can just give me a roundabout number if you don't know exactly.
Yeah, so we had 2 faculty, so most of our faculty, a lot of them trained here. And so 2 years ago, 3 residents stayed on as faculty. One of them went to Fort Worth to start a practice, Dr. Saad. One of them went back to fellowship to DermPath. So he's going to be the DermPath fellow. And then one of them stayed on. So I wouldn't say lost to, but 2 of them left this year. So I want to say but one of them stayed last year. So it's like, again, a lot of change has been happening. And so I want to say maybe like 13 or 14. We have a decent amount of faculty. We have more faculty than residents for sure. And then that's not counting, by the way, that's not counting the VA faculty. That's 3 more at the VA, if you count the VA faculty.
That's great. Does your program have a research fellowship for medical students?
We do not have a research fellowship. We have a away rotation. Med students can apply through VSLO and come rotate here, but we don't do like clinical trials. We don't do any like of that big research stuff. We still are active in research. So my program will be hosting the Texas Derm Society meeting in September, and I think it's Bastrop, Texas, one of the resorts there. So we're actually prepping cases and talks and everything. So we're still pretty active in research, but not to the point where we need like research fellows or anything. We like to share these projects with medical students. Me personally, I usually share them with A&M medical students, San Antonio medical students, UTMB. All the Texas schools is usually where I share my projects.
Well, that's great. I'm glad that you're involved, and I look forward to the Texas Dermatological Society
Yeah,
meeting in the fall that you guys are planning.
it'll be fun. It'll be fun.
So, my next question for you is, how do you view students who've done a research year or have a PhD or not?
Yeah, so I don't I'm not sure how many people we've had people apply with, MD, PhD. We've had plenty of people apply with a research year. We don't look, unfavorably. I know some programs will look unfavorably upon them, especially if they're like, we're not a huge, institution where we need, that level of research. We have a couple of student or a couple of residents in my class, or sorry, within the class right now that have graduated with research years. A couple of the residents in the past that graduated have done research years. A lot of them have done either a different specialty and then they, had to transition to a research year, then reapply to dermatology, which is the case for the residents that are in our program. And that was, I mean, they're here. A couple of them have graduated, they've become attendings already. So we definitely don't look down on it. I think a research year can certainly make you competitive. Now, if you're a good applicant with a decent amount of research, good step scores, good personal statement, good recommendation letters, I don't think you personally need, a research year. It's a situational thing.
Sounds good. That's good advice. So, um, do you guys accept DO or international medical students?
So I'm not sure about the because we've started our program. I believe it was started by Dr. Butler 2004. Um, don't quote me on how far it goes today, because I would say that's like what 20, almost 20 years for our program.
Yeah.
So don't quote me on it. But as far as I know, for the past 5 years, I don't think we've had a DO or an IMG.
Okay.
Um, but I'm not sure about the past in terms of like between 2004 to 2018. I'm not sure, but
So
that
you're saying recent past, you haven't had one,
recent
but
past,
that
we haven't accepted DO and IMGs. We've certainly interviewed, I think, a couple of DO applicants. I'm not sure about IMG because the IMG thing is not necessarily that we don't interview IMG. I think it's a Scott and White thing about the visa and providing a visa, because there's H1 visa, JB1, and all that stuff. I don't know the nuances behind it, but I think some hospital systems just avoid that, which is
well
the
that
reason. Yeah,
yeah, that's good to know. So it sounds like if you're an IMG applicant, it's something to look into further because we don't know the exact answers to it, and there may be an
exactly. Yeah,
institutional thing. Yeah.
yeah.
So tell me more about the structure of your program from PGY2 to PGY4 year, and what you guys go through and how much of the different subspecialties you get to see.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So our program is unique. I don't think a lot of programs in the U.S. I don't want to say Texas, but in the U.S. total has our program structure. The traditional structure is a blocked system where you do general dermatology, a block of pediatric dermatology, and then a block at the VA even, or a block of Mohs at the end of your first year or beginning of your second year. Ours is unique in the sense that we do it in a half day system. And so PGY2 to PGY4 year, it's fairly similar in terms of day to day schedule. What's different is the call and the consult schedule. And I guess we'll go down that a little later in the meeting, I believe. But as far as day to day, I like today I had what we call our time. Our time is a dedicated halftime to research callbacks. If you have a doctor's appointment, just to, kind of almost like having your life back, which is nice in residency. And so mine was this morning, and I was telling Jake, like, I had to take my wife's car down to Georgetown. I'm in Temple, so it's about a 40-minute drive. I had to go down there to the dealership, and it's a routine maintenance. So it's nice having that morning. Now I'm doing this podcast. So it's really nice to have that extra time. Not a lot of programs will give you a dedicated R time. Some programs only give it to the chiefs. And so the first 2 years, you're just doing clinic every day. And because the Chiefs have duties like making schedules and doing all that stuff. But for us, it's all 3 years. You have the dedicated R time.
That sounds like a
And
really nice perk.
yes, very nice. Very underrated too. And so this afternoon, I'm going to the VA to do teledermatology. Even within the VA, there's different things you can do. So Teledermatology is usually Wednesday afternoons and Friday afternoons. PGY3 and PGY4s usually do it. Wednesday mornings and every other Friday morning, we do procedure clinic at the VA. So we have excisions, biopsies, just random stuff at the VA. And sometimes they'll sneak in a couple of office visits there too. Every other Monday morning, there is also a procedure clinic, but there's also a clinic right, like a normal clinic next to it. So there's two residents usually there. Monday afternoons also clinic. Tuesday morning is clinic. Tuesday afternoons clinic. So that's how the VA is kind of. So even the VA is a little shifty. You could do telederm, you could do excisions or procedure clinic. You could be in the normal clinic. As far as the Scott and White clinic, we have a lot of dermatologists, and a lot of them do procedures. Some only do procedures such as excisions and nail procedures, so they don't do the Mohs. And some do Mohs as well as just excisions and other stuff. And so, depending on which faculty you're with, so I could have basically my schedule for this week. I had clinic Monday morning and then VA Monday afternoon. And then I had pediatric dermatology Tuesday morning. And then I had, this is a mock one. So then I had, Dr. Brown has excisions. She doesn't do Mohs. And so I did excisions with Dr. Brown's. And then Wednesday, I had general dermatology Wednesday afternoon and Wednesday morning and Wednesday afternoon. I had just clinic and clinic with two different attendings, but it was just general dermatology clinic. Thursday morning, we have dedicated didactics in the beginning of the year. So starting from July to mid-August, we do 7:30 to 12, which is just dedicated didactics. There's no clinical duties in that time, which is really nice. We do sometimes, so Wednesday at lunchtime, we do monthly journal clubs, or sorry, weekly journal club. Sometimes they change into resident meetings when we meet with our program director and stuff. But the dedicated didactic Thursday morning is awesome for everybody. And then Thursday afternoon, I had Mohs surgery with Dr. Housewright. And then today I had my R time. And then in the afternoon, I have teledermatology. So you can see I've done peds derm, gen derm, excisions, Mohs, teledermatology all in 1 week. So I prefer that, me personally, which is why I love this program. I could go, this whole meeting could be just about why I chose this program, and that's not what the meeting's about. But um, just having that variety in 1 week is really good for me because I feel like I would just, I don't know, I wouldn't say burn out, but if I had just general dermatology 6 months in a row with not that many procedures, without seeing peds derm, just I mean, it's good. We all like general dermatology; it's the bread and butter. But for me, knowing how I am surgically, if I don't do any surgery in the next 6 months or the next year, I will lose my skills because it's a muscle memory thing. So I love that, at least a half day in the week, I get to do either excisions or Mohs, and I get very hands on, very involved, um, which is really nice for us.
That's awesome. That sounds like a great benefit to the program is that you get to do things throughout the year and it's not just in blocks. It
Definitely.
sounds
Yeah.
like your weeks are very variable as well, which gives some variety, I assume.
Yeah, for sure.
That's great. Do you guys get any elective time?
Yes. So we get 6 weeks of electives, and per the discretion of RPD, Dr. Parekh. So usually we tend to use them our PGY 3 year or second half of PGY 3 year and our PGY 4 year. Now the elective times it's 6 weeks. You can use them as interview time. So if you're looking for a job, you're not doing a fellowship, you can use the electives for just job interviews. If you want to travel, even if it's virtual, you can take that day off and just do a job interview, obviously per the discretion of the PD if we need coverage of the clinic and stuff. Um, you can go to conferences, outside conferences like the AAD and the Texas Derm Society meeting. If you want to go to the Orlando one or you want to go to some random one, you can use elective times for conferences too. That's outside your PTO. And then you can use your elective time for electives. So one of our incoming Chiefs did a 1 week elective after the AED, which was in March. So end of March, he did a 1 week elective in San Diego for in cosmetic dermatology, and so he went there for a week, used his elective time, and came back. So
That's great. Sounds like you have opportunities for electives. Do you spend time on other services such as plastic surgery, rheumatology, yeah, etc.?
so At the VA, there are some changes happening. We will be going to the VA more often, and some of those Monday mornings, I said every other Monday, there are clinics. Uh, our faculty, that's every other Monday. She's also faculty at Dell in Austin. And so the every other Monday that she's not there, I believe, again, don't quote me. We will start doing probably wound care, maybe podiatry. I think I'm trying to push for plastic surgery because they get to do a lot of, cyst excision, lipoma excisions, even NMSC excisions, like skin cancer excisions too. Um, so that would be really nice. As far as rheumatology, I think they're also in the talks for that. Me personally, I chose the TY to get a lot of electives. So in my TY, I did rheumatology, pathology, dermatology, research. I had a research month in my, and so like and one thing I wish I did was like, at least a couple of weeks in plastic surgery as an intern, because even then, if they get you involved, you can learn something that you could apply in your residency. But you could also, sorry, Jake, I forgot to mention, you could also use the 6 weeks of electives. You don't necessarily have to rotate in a different institution, in dermatology or Mohs or peds or cosmetics. I can use one of my 6 weeks and say like, hey, I really want to shadow, Surg Onc or ENT or plastics at Scott and White, and obviously we'll find a good time and we could do that too if we wanted to.
That's great. So the next question I have for you has to do with your clinical sites, and you've already jumped into a lot of it. I wanted to hear a little about the VA, and then you also talked about your Baylor Scott and White Medical Center. And then another question that often comes up is, do you get pediatric experience, and where is that? So yeah, you can dive into as much as you feel like you haven't said already about the
Yeah.
clinical sites.
So VA, I think I kind of covered it. We have the telederm, the excisions, and then the normal clinic. Their system is CPRS. That's the EMR system, and not as efficient as Epic. Not as efficient as some of us would like it to be. Um, but you once you learn it, it has its own little quirks and things. So that's what we do at the VA. In the Scott and White Clinic and the hospital, it's the Epic system, so it's pretty seamless and you can use it. It's pretty fast. Um, Otherwise, I think you said what was the other one? And then the West Campus DermPath, you're not really writing notes or anything. You're just reading slides with them. Those are the main clinical sites. As far as the hospital, it is part of the clinical sites because when you're on call or consults and you get a consult to the hospital, you go see the patient, you do a biopsy, and you take it to the lab yourself, and but it's all seamless. It's all in the same thing. You don't have to drive 30 minutes, 40 minutes to a different place. So the Scott and White Clinic, Scott and White Hospital is Epic EMR. The VA has CPRS, PedsDerm. Now we do have McLean's Children. They are, so I guess that would be one of the sites too. If Scott and White is here, there's a little bridge right there, and there's McLean Children right there. So it's not very far. I always joke with everybody, the furthest thing in Temple is 15 minutes away. And so I've gone to the Peds hospital maybe once or twice in person because I was on consults, like on a weekend, or I was covering for whoever was on consults. And I went to the ER and I saw my patient, hour and a half, and then I left. Um, so that's about it. It's very easy. Like, we don't, um, usually the upper years when the first years start, we show them around the hospital. I mean, we don't know the hospital in and out. We're dermatology, everything's outpatient, but we know enough to where like, where's the lab and where's the building at, and that's where we go. Where do I park to? That's a very important question for peds derm. So it's not necessarily in the hospital, it's in the same Scott and White clinic. We have Dr. Hendricks, she's our pediatric dermatologist. She works Tuesday to Thursday, and she strictly sees peds derm. And so sometimes you're scheduled with her 2 half days in a week or 1 half day in a week. So you're always seeing peds derm. There are a couple of the general dermatologists, right? That mainly see adult. They'll have a couple of peds patients in their clinic too. So it's not just like you have to be in Hendricks clinic to actually see peds. There are a couple that will have, like, if they're seeing 14 patients in the morning, they'll have 2 to 4 peds patients within their clinic scheduled that morning too. So we get to see peds pretty much every day, which is nice. Again, peds derm. I want to say we are definitely blessed to have the faculty because there are many programs that do not have a pediatric dermatologist. There are many states, like total states, that don't have many pediatric dermatologists. There are many states that only have one in the whole state of pediatric dermatology. So they're very rare, and that's why people are, they're pushing people to go into pediatric dermatology. It's a very much needed profession.
Great. I think you'd answered my question pretty holistically and pretty thoroughly. So
Yeah.
this next question is about the strengths of your program, and here's your chance to brag about everything,
Um,
all the reasons why you wanted to go, and everything you like about it.
I would say I'm kind of biased. So my program, I think I mentioned a little earlier, it is transitioning to Baylor College of Medicine, and that's just Skywise as a whole. But when I was a medical student, it was Texas A&M. And so when I was in M2 and I reached out to Dr. Park, who's our current PD, so I reached out to Dr. Fiala, who's our current chair, who had just at that summer of 2019 transitioned to the chair, and she was like, "Oh, I'm not the program director; it's Park." And so then I ended up reaching out to Dr. Park. Um, so I had the privilege of having Dr. Parks mentoring for a couple of years as a med student, and just knowing how she is and the good person that she is. And she's the sweetest, nicest, most kind program director that you would meet, not just in dermatology. I challenge anyone to bring up from any other field that's as nice and as sweet as Dr. Park. And that's not just coming from me as a resident. That is coming from every med student that has ever rotated here, in and outside this institution, other faculties, her patients. Her patients love her. And so that's what I'm saying. I'm a little biased. But there are obviously other things to brag about the program. We are a very surgically inclined program, have a very high surgical field, or sorry, surgical exposure. And so I started last year, I started July 3rd because our July 1st was a Saturday. So my first day, they gave us a little orientation, which saw patients. And so a week later, July 10th, I was scheduled that morning with Dr. Housewright, and we had a patient. He draws around the cancer and just flips the scalpel and hands it to me. And so 1 week in, I took my first layer and my second layer. And then that Wednesday, I had Dr. Housewright, July 12th. I mean, this was pretty, I would say it's a very life changing thing because I went into dermatology not wanting to do surgery or Mohs or any of that stuff. Because to me, shadowing it as a med student wasn't as appealing to me. But just having him hand you the scalpel and you doing it. And so July 12th was the first day I did my full procedure. So I took the first layer, it cleared. And then we go in there and we draw the reconstruction plan. And he just gives me that good old house right thumb and just leaves the room and lets me, do my thing. And I remember coming home that day from work and just talking to my wife, having this midlife crisis. I'm like, I thought I wanted to finish in 3 years and start working. Do I really have to apply for a fellowship now? And so, and what is it? A year later, and now I'm like pretty much set on a fellowship, honestly. And so that's a lot of positives. You come out very surgically inclined, whether you do Mohs or not. You go to any practice, they want a dermatologist who's comfortable with procedures. So it's whether it's shave removals, excisions. Excisions are a big thing in dermatology. So general dermatologists should be able to do comfortably excisions pretty much anywhere in the body. Obviously, there are some cosmetically sensitive areas you send to most surgeons. But if you have a cyst on the scalp, a mole on the scalp, a mole on the back, a mole on the neck, that's something a general dermatologist should be comfortable doing. And I feel like our program prepares us very well to do that. And so but then the faculty are also very invested and they're very nice, and they teach well. Very huge positive about our program is most, if not all, the lectures are led by the faculty. So we don't have to stress about starting a lecture, reading a chapter, and making a PowerPoint slide and teaching our co-residents about the porphyrias, and you're like, I'm clueless about porphyrias, but that's the one I got assigned, and I have to teach everybody. All of them are faculty led, which really gives us the time to go home, read the day before, the couple days before that lecture. You're reading, you're digesting it, you're learning the material, and then it gets solidified in that lecture when they ask you questions, when you go through the PowerPoint slides. So it's really nice. That's a huge positive. You have no idea how many friends I have in other programs where they have to prepare the slides and they have to prepare the lecture. There are positives in that. There are always positives and negatives and everything. But for me, it's just the stress behind it. That takes away a little bit from the learning, that you're stressed about making this, and now you have to teach other people. What if you misspeak or misspoke? Because you're still a resident. You're not 100% perfect. So that coupled with the art time, that extra day off, like they really do care about life work balance. Medicine's a great career, but there is life outside of medicine, which is why I appreciate Jake asking that in the beginning. Okay, what do you do outside of dermatology? Because that's just as important as dermatology.
That's great. It sounds like you're in the right program for you and the
Yeah,
things that you
definitely.
like. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good fit.
I haven't even scratched the surface, to be honest. I have not, like, a lot of us buy house. I think you'll ask that question. I'll let you get there.
Yes, I'll ask more about housing and what most people do. But before we get there, I'll jump into weaknesses slash where's your program making improvements?
So we're making improvements in cosmetics. So Temple is, I would say, it's 45 minutes south of Waco, an hour north of Austin. So some people call it rural-ish. It's a growing town. Um, I like to think the medical center is downtown Temple. It's a huge hospital system out there. And so we don't, there are a lot of patients over here are mainly retired, kind of farmers of that kind of background. But we do have an army base about 30 minutes away. And so we get a lot of skin of color patients through that. And we have a Harker Heights clinic that we can do an elective there. We just go there for a week or 2 weeks, and we just go work over there and treat our skin of color patients there. A lot of them come to Temple too at our clinic. So one thing is the demand for cosmetics, I would say, is not as high as it would be in a city like Austin or a city like Houston or a city like Dallas. But we do a ton of Botox and chemical peels and PDLs. So that has been something that I've seen change personally. Because when I was here as a med student, I remember the residents then would say, our cosmetics is not as strong. But I mean, in my own senior clinic, I have chemical peels, resident microneedling, all that sclerotherapy. They just book you that. And so that has improved. We are trying to get this grant to where whoever does the fillers and the Botox can send to the residents. So that way we have more, I would say, practice sessions um, in terms of like learning fillers and everything like that. So I feel like we're already speaking to the hospital and we're in that process too. So we're making that positive change, hopefully. Um, as far as other places, I'm trying to think. It is a growing program, and with growing, there is growing pains. And so I think our program now will be going to the VA more often. And so that would mean, I would say, less maybe exposure to surgery in the main clinic, because we mainly do normal clinics at the VA. And so I would say maybe again, like this starts like this year, so we haven't even tried it yet. They just start this year, so that's something I possibly could see, but I'm not sure, to be honest. Um, I'm not sure. A lot of positives, honestly. As far as negatives, I'm trying to think. And so, are you talking about negatives in general? Because I could talk about, some people don't like necessarily being in Temple because it's a smaller town. They might say the nightlife is not what it is. Again, that's a con to somebody, but that's a pro to me, or that's a positive to somebody. So another man's trash is another man's treasure. Like for me, I like the quiet, I like the no traffic, I like all that stuff. So to me, is a huge positive. I knew it was 2 hours away from Dallas. That's where my family, that's where my in-laws are. So it was an easy drive away if I need them. They're close enough, but not too close. And so but in terms of program specific, I think it's what I mentioned, those two. But in terms of my program being in Temple, yeah, I've seen some people say like, "Oh, we don't have the trendy restaurants and we don't have, the hypest stuff." Which, I mean, yes, if you are into that stuff, that's not something that I would say is in Temple. You could drive, up to Waco, and they might have that stuff. You can drive down to Austin; they might have that stuff too. But I mean, they're building newer restaurants, and multiple gyms have opened up already. So there's like this new gym T3 everybody goes to, which is really nice. And so
Well, that's great. I'm glad that you mentioned more about the town too, because that question is supposed to be, yeah, weaknesses, I
yeah,
guess, in all senses, and including
exactly,
like, and Temple itself can be a pro or a con to somebody, which I
exactly.
know we've had lots of discussions about. So you kind of alluded to this already. You talked about your senior clinic, continuity clinic.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can tell me more about that. What do you get to do it only as a senior, or do you get to do it all throughout your time as PGY 2 through 4? Yeah, tell me a little more about that.
Yeah. So as a first year, so as a PGY2, you don't have senior clinic or continuity clinic. You start it as a PGY3. So actually, my first senior clinic is this Monday, and it's Monday mornings. So senior clinics are in the afternoon. So it's Monday mornings, which is usually faculty led by a different faculty. Then on Tuesday afternoons, there's Wednesday afternoon. Um, Excuse me, and then there's Friday afternoon. So PGY threes and PGY fours. So there's usually two senior clinics. So it's usually me as a PGY three and somebody else as a PGY four, and then there's one faculty. And so we each see about 9 patients. Usually they're 20-minute appointments as opposed to the 15-minute with like the normal clinic. And your last slot, which is at 3:40 p.m., is either an excision, so you can cut out a skin cancer, a cyst, a lipoma, whatever it is. It can be a chemical peel, it can be Botox, it can be filler, it can be sclero, it can be microneedling, it can be PDL laser, it could be anything that you want or whatever they fit in. So for me, I kind of keep track of my clinic because they want to fill that clinic up to with patients. I kind of keep track of my procedure slot, my 340 slot, because sometimes if it's a cosmetic thing, a lot of times it drops off and we don't notice it, and they'll fill it in the same day with something else. And so if I see something open and I have a patient that I just biopsied cancer, I'm like, I'll message that attending, hey, can I put him in my senior clinic so I can cut it out? Yeah, sure. And I'll add them on. And so like I have a cyst on the scalp this Monday, and then I have I think a basal cell on the back on Friday. Because so I start out with two senior clinics. So Monday afternoons and Friday afternoons are going to be my senior clinic for all of July. For August, my senior clinic is going to be Wednesday afternoons. So that's just up to the scheduling chief and Dr. Parik, our program director, about how they switch it up. There are some instances where there's three senior clinics going on at the same time. So it's like one PGY three and like two PGY fours. The cool thing about this, though, is again, you get to do procedures. Whatever that last slot is, it's either cosmetic or a procedure. Um, and so the cool thing about it is when you become a chief, so when you become a PGY4, uh, one of you, because you're doing senior clinic all month, right? Whether it's a Monday afternoon, a Wednesday afternoon, Tuesday afternoon, or a Friday afternoon, it's clinic, and then that last slot is a procedure. So when you become a chief, um, one of those, because if there's 4 weeks in July, so for mine it's going to be clinic all four of them, and only that last slide is going to be an excision. So my chief in July, who's with me those 4 weeks, one of the four is strictly procedures. So chiefs get to do one senior clinic a month that's strictly procedures. Usually it's mainly just three excisions they tack onto it, a nail procedure if they want to do a nail procedure. Some of them even do three procedures, and then that last one they'll double book it as a Botox because they feel comfortable enough to do Botox. Some people even now, as a PGY3, their 340 slot, they're so booked out on Botox, they're like, just double book them my 340. I'll do two patients with Botox. That's Dr. Yusuf, but he's he's really good at that stuff. I mean, he's booked out like crazy, and people love what he does in terms of chemical peels and all that stuff. And so it's nice that you have the autonomy to like kind of choose if you want to do that. And so I'm kind of excited for like being in chief. One of my senior clinics out of the month is strictly just going to be excisions or whatever it's going to be. So it's going to be really nice. That's mainly senior clinic.
That's great. It seems like you kind of answered a lot of the future questions that I had. One of them was how much autonomy do you get? And it seems like you get
Oh,
quite a
yeah.
bit of autonomy as you go, and you can kind of tailor your practice to what you want. Dr. Yusuf, it sounds like, is into the cosmetics, and some of the others may do more procedures and stuff. So that's really cool.
Yeah, no, it's really nice. At the end of the day, it is about patient ownership, and even though it's faculty led, they definitely, it's you call the shots. Like, hey, this person's uncontrolled HS. We've already tried these antibiotics. Like, I want to start them on Humira, or Humira didn't work. You know what? I want to start them on Cosentyx. Like, you get to call the shots. You get to prescribe what you want. Obviously, you have to take into the patient's account and make shared decision making, but you call the shots.
Hmm.
They'll correct you if you're like completely off, but at that point you should feel comfortable diagnosing and treating and
Yeah,
coming up with a management plan.
that's great. So changing gears a little bit, do you guys have global health opportunities?
Not that I know of, to be honest. I'm assuming you have 3 weeks of PTO, and so like if you can find kind of stockpile the 3 weeks. I don't know how long of a mission trip it like you can do like a 1 week mission trip. I know like in Texas A&M they have like 1 week mission trips. I don't see why not if you find an opportunity and you use your PTO. Um, I don't think that the program would fund it. I'm assuming any of these mission trips usually are self-funded, and so if you can self-fund it and you want to go on a mission trip, as long as you take the PTO, I don't think there's anything against it. Don't quote me on that.
Okay.
But
You
not
guys
that
don't
we,
have anything organized, I guess, that is
yeah,
already
there's no like affiliation with something in like South America or
Mhm.
Africa or Europe or something like that. No.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So tell me a little bit more about call and consult service.
Okay, good. Yeah. So it gets a little confusing. Ours is also different. I feel like a lot of people that are on call and other programs are also on consult. So ours is nice in the sense that we separate those two. So we have a consult person, which is usually a PGY3 or a PGY4. I start taking consults the second half of my PGY3 year. You start taking call. So as a first year, as a PGY2, your call that first semester is only going to be for holidays, like national holidays and conferences. So Texas Derm Society conference. That's all covered by the first years. The rest of the call for that semester, so from July till December of this year, it's going to be me and my two core residents that are covering everything. Those holiday weekends and Christmas and Thanksgiving and New Year's are going to be covered by first year, but the rest is by us. And so your call picks up your second half of PGY2 year. Your consults start your second half of PGY3 year. I know it sounds a little confusing. And so basically, I'm trying to explain it where it's not too confusing. So your first semester as a first year, you don't take that much call because you're only doing holidays and the Texas Derm Society meeting. So there's only like maybe 5 weeks that semester of call, and it's split between the first years, the PGY2s. The rest of the weeks are done by us. So if I want to look at it in the sense of a first year, I don't have that much call as a you know in that semester because most of the PGY3s are going to be doing that call. The PGY3s usually finish call early January. So now who picks up the call? It's going to be the first years. So that rest of the year from January to December, it's mainly going to be the first years because then the PGY3s that just finished call, they start consults. Um, Again, I think I just made it even more confusing. But let's talk about responsibilities. The call is Monday to Sunday, and your responsibility is going to be if there's any residents out on vacation or attendings out on vacations, you cover their inboxes. If there's a biopsy that came back at cancer, you have to call the patient, let them know, try to get them scheduled in a timely manner. If there's any patient messages that are like urgent, like "Hey, I'm having trouble," like you answer that, and any calls from the clinic. If somebody had Mohs or an excision or something done or a biopsy and they're like, "Oh, I'm bleeding," or like, "Hey, what do I do with this?" You're the call person. You're the one that's covering that. The consult person, it's a Monday to Friday thing from 8 to 5. And so if you're on consults in the morning, you do normal clinic stuff. but you're probably getting paged by the hospital. And then your afternoons that whole month, so consults, you do consults 1 month at a time. So when I do consults, that morning I will have clinics scheduled, or Mohs or excisions or VA or something, right, that morning. But all my after there's no senior clinic, there's nothing in the afternoon, because that's my dedicated call time to go to the hospital, do biopsies, see the patients, do all that stuff. So it's nice because it's Monday to Friday and your afternoon is dedicated. There are programs where you're on call, you do clinic all day, and it's after hours that you go to the hospital. And you're also on consult. So you cover clinic plus hospital. So our consults is Monday to Friday. 8 to 5 is when they cover that pager from the hospital. Now, after hours from 5:01 to 8 a.m., yeah, from 5:01 p.m. to 8 a.m., it's the call person. So now the call person is covering anything with the clinic, and if there's from the hospital after hours, that's on the call person. So the first year, the PGY2 or PGY3. And so if you need to go to the hospital, you have to go to a hospital. If you need to bring a bleeder in from the clinic to stop the bleeding, you bring him in. Um, and then for the call person, so like I said, the consult's Monday to Friday. So then the consult person's off on the weekend, and then the consults go to the call person. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that
Yeah.
does. That definitely helps to delineate their responsibilities and stuff.
Yeah.
That makes it easier to understand.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And so usually the consult person, let's say like Thursday is, Thanksgiving. So if you're on consults that month, so since you're the upper, the first year who's covering that holiday will be the person who's taking consults also. So on call and consults for that. So holidays also shift a little bit too.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. Switching gears again, I wanted to talk a little bit more about research. We already talked a little bit more about the research at your institution, so we don't have to go into that more. But what are your specific research requirements for your program?
I believe our research requirements are just you have to like submit something to let me see. She said this to us literally our first day of residency. It's like you have to submit something to either publish something or submit a presentation to either TDS or AAD. Once a year, or publish something once a year. So it's nothing, extravagant. It's very simple to achieve. We have plenty of good cases. When TDS happens, we all just like brainstorm, or have like this we have a research meeting basically. All right, what are some cool cases that we have that we can write up and submit to these meetings, whether it's TDS and AAD. So we have multiple research meetings throughout the year, and that takes place instead of the Wednesday. So Wednesday lunchtime, we usually have journal club, but there are instances where, one of those will be a resident meeting or a wellness lecture, or a research meeting, stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then do you have to do a quality improvement project?
Yes. So part of your graduation, the QI is usually with the VA. So you have to do an approved QI with the VA. Yeah.
Okay. Do you guys get uh help financially through either grants or scholarship or something to go to conferences?
Yes. And so the AAD usually, so the TDS will reimburse your hotel, usually. And I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think it's just the hotel. So they'll reimburse 1 night of the hotel. And yeah, it's a driving distance. For AAD, we do get grants. So we all submit an abstract. The AAD themselves gives every resident $500, which is nice. And then my program, if you submit something, you get an additional $500. So that's 1,000. If you get something accepted, that's an additional $500. You can apply to this research travel grant with Scott and White, which is $1,500. So that one's just $1,500 flat, and then you tack the $500 from the AAD on. You got $2,000 that you can go to the AAD with. If you submit something through the VA and it gets accepted to the AAD, it is a full all expense paid vacation. It's not a vacation, but you know what I mean. The
Yeah.
VA is very generous with it. One of
Mhm.
our chiefs that graduated, I think last not this AAD, the AAD before, she had something through the VA and it was all reimbursed or covered and everything.
That's great. Are there
Yeah.
any other financial benefits, with your program? We talked about conferences,
Um,
publications.
so so as a resident, you get $500. So we provide all the books. Our incoming residents picked up 50 pounds worth of book, Bologna, Andrews, all that stuff. So we provide that. We don't have you buy that stuff, which is nice. But our program gives you $500 education stipend for the 3 years. And so a lot of people, they would use that to buy like the Derm Q Bank. Now, this five, so you have three required publications. It has to be a PubMed indexed thing. So Curious could be one of them. You could publish all three in Curious. That technically counts. Once you meet your three requirements of a publication, anything above that, you'll get another $100 of educational stipend. So let's say I have $500 that I didn't touch yet. I published my three. I do three publication as a first year, and they're all PubMed index. I just met my requirement to graduate. And let's say my second year, I publish five. It's up to $500. So now I have $1,000 of educational stuff. So you have $500 to begin with, and after you do your three required publications, anything above that, you would get an extra $100 to your educational stipend. So basically, if you have eight publications that are PubMed indexed, you can get up to 500 extra dollars to your additional $500 that you have.
That's great. Sounds like they're trying to encourage you guys to, do research and to participate in those kind of things.
Definitely, yeah. You don't have to worry about buying textbooks. That's our biggest thing. Like, we don't have to worry about that. Everything is provided for that.
That's great. That's great. Okay, well that's good. Let's jump into we talked about exam prep a lot actually. You've already talked about didactics, and you guys have those on Thursday mornings. It sounds like, and you apparently you provide your program provides all of the textbooks, and we already talked about administrative time for study and research. Is there anything you want to add before we jump into other things?
I'm trying to think. I mean, they do give us adequate enough time to study. The art time is a great time to study. Just like being in dermatology, with the weekend, with the light weekends, you have plenty of time to study for any board exam or anything. So I think our program definitely preps us well with the lectures, with the $500 stipend. I think we usually try to combine it with other residents, so they give us a discount, and that usually covers the Q bank. Um, Excuse me. Other additional stuff, like there's this derm mnemonics I'm thinking of getting. It's like sketchy, but for dermatology, and so that might just come out of pocket unless if you end up publishing five more, then eventually you'll get it reimbursed. But no, I feel like we do pretty well in terms of prepping the residents for sure.
That's great. So tell us a little bit more about your program leadership. Dr. Park, you already mentioned, is the program director, Dr. Fiala, the chair.
Uh, yeah, so Dr. Fiala is the chair of the dermatology department. Dr. Parik is the program director. And then Dr. Furukawa, she's the assistant program director. She's awesome. They're all awesome. Dr. Furukawa actually was new. So, like I said, I knew Dr. Parik in this program for a while as a home student. And so when I started as a resident, and I was like, oh, who's this? She's new, and she was an assistant program director, and so she had came on as faculty when I started my intern year, like a couple months into my intern year. So she wasn't there when I interviewed as an M4. It was the year after that she started, but she's awesome. She's like, she did an IM residency and then went into derm. So she's definitely our medical dermatology expert. She's our dermoscopy expert. Our program won the dermoscopy bowl at the AAD national meeting. And honestly, all thanks to Dr. Furukawa and our one of our chiefs that just graduated, Dr. Staples, and our upcoming chiefs. Three of them were in that dermoscopy team. And Dr. Furukawa's educational dermoscopy modules and lectures. I mean, she's awesome. She's great.
That's
Those
great.
are Yeah, those are top three. I mean, you can divide it into like Dr. Hendricks, our pediatric dermatology director. Dr. Housewright is our Mohs surgery or surgical dermatology or dermatologic surgery director. So yeah, that's how I break it. Dr. Housewright is awesome. He's the one that kind of like changed my life that day when he handed me that scalpel. But yeah, he's one of my personal mentors. Honestly, he knows I'm interested in Mo's, and so I definitely like working with him a lot too, for sure.
That's great. Sounds like you have good faculty there that care a lot.
Oh, they're all amazing, and they've all helped me in some shape or form. Um, they've all helped me in some shape or form, and
That's
so
great.
I'm obviously immensely grateful. Even some that are not here yet because they left elsewhere in their career. They were all great for to me as a medical student too. Definitely learned a ton from them, and yeah.
Nice. So are the faculty receptive to feedback? You kind of already talked about some of the improvements and stuff you guys are doing.
Yeah, definitely. One thing we do in our program, more often, I would say others, we definitely have monthly meetings with Dr. Parekh, like a resident meeting, like, hey, do y'all have feedback for us? And she is very receptive. Like I said, I could go on an hour talking about how cool and great Dr. Parekh is. She's very receptive. She has an open door policy. God knows how many times I've just walked into her office, whether she's eating lunch or in a meeting, or and I'm like, oh, sorry, I'll be back. She's like, oh, I'll come and find you, and so she'll come to the resident room, find me, and then we'll go meet. So it's not necessarily just meetings. If you have anything, you just go directly to Dr. Park. She'll close the door to her room. You just talk to her. She listens. She understands, and she helps us for sure.
Let's now jump into a little bit more about resident life. I think some of these questions are really interesting. This is where you can really get to know the program. The first question is, what's the culture of the program like? The personalities and interests of the residents, faculty, etc.
Yeah. So I think our residents were like, oh God, I'm gonna sound like a broken record. I used to hate hearing this as a med student, like, oh, we're a tight knit family. Um, but like I feel like we're pretty close all together. We definitely try to help each other out. One is a personal story of mine. I was in my wife and I had an anniversary trip in May. Um, Luckily for us, we were in Cancun when the storm hit in Temple, and it was pretty devastating to the city. Thankfully, the only thing that was down is just our fences in the back. Thankfully, not major roof damage or anything. But you're outside the country, you're stressed, and so I had, two of my co-residents, one of the chiefs and one of my co-resident. They drove to my house personally just to make sure everything's okay. One of them, she went inside just to make sure, the cat's okay. There's no internal damage. There's no leaking. So, nobody just does that for you that you don't really like I trust these people. I trust them enough to bring them to my house, and I would do the same for them had God forbid if they are ever in that situation. Um, we truly are close. We try to go out as often. I feel like I'm just a homebody. I try not to go out, but like yesterday we had a pharma dinner, and so it was nice like hanging out with them. A lot of them, some of them go to the same gym together. A lot of them study together. So the Chiefs are studying for a course, so a couple of them will study together too. Um, Trying to think, we have this culture of like get give more than you get. And so like every time there's a birthday, it's just a culture. If there's a birthday thing, they'll decorate your desk. All the residents pitch in and get crumble cookies and muffins or whatever. Whoever, one of the co-residents will go pick it up that morning or that afternoon. And we dedicate, like, the scheduling person knows when the birthdays are, and they'll give that person our time that morning or that afternoon, usually in the morning. They're like, nope, you're not coming in this morning. They'll give them our time, just that way we decorate it that morning, so that when they come in the afternoon, their desk is all decorated. They get, whatever restaurant they wrote in the beginning. Lacey, our coordinators, have you fill out what's your favorite color, what restaurant, all this. She'll give you a gift card to that restaurant. It's a very giving culture. There's a culture of even the attendings being grateful for us helping them in clinic, and so around Christmas time, all the attendings will give all the residents a gift. We usually give them a smaller gift in return, just because we're appreciative of them too, but nothing compared to the gifts they give us. Not just in terms of monetary value, but in terms of education and time and dedication. all that stuff. I don't think anything that we'd give them would ever surmount to amount of gratefulness that we should have for them. Um, and then there's also, when the chief residents graduate, we always kind of get them something too because they're graduating. They were our chiefs. They kind of led us through this year. They helped us. We look up to them. We learned a lot from them. I personally learned a lot from all three of them too. Um, so there's a culture of giving. So a lot of some of the residents, they'll bake and they'll bring stuff to the resident room and we'll all eat together. Some residents are like, oh, I got this, or some patient brought me this, and they'll share it with the rest of us. So I just nobody asks for something, but everybody gives something without asking, without prompting. So it's just it's a good culture. I feel good going. Just I like going to work because I like the people that I work with.
That's great. Do you guys hang out outside of work? And
I
what do you
I'm a
guys do?
homebody. I look, I it's not that I don't like hanging out. I'm sure some of the residents do. I just come home and I just hang out with my wife some of the times. A lot of us, like I said, a couple of them will go to the gym together because they go to the T3 gym or the what's that, the Orange Theory. And so a lot of the residents had this Survivor. So you used to, a weekly thing. They'll just watch Survivor together. It's like a TV show, I think. I could be butchering it completely wrong, but
That's
I know
right.
some of
That's
the,
right. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
you're right.
And so a lot of the residents do hang out outside of work. I think for me, it's just, I try to spend some time with my wife because, residency, being a medical spouse is not very easy. So I try to be very mindful of that. I could be better, honestly, but I'm trying. We can always try.
Yeah, that's true. We can always try.
Yeah.
So this question we already kind of started talking about before. Do most people rent or own their living space and is it like house, condo,
Yeah.
apartments?
So here's the positives about Temple. Um, it's adding on to that. Why do you like Temple so much? Why did you choose this program? It's a very good cost of living. Our salaries here as a resident, you can search it up. It's all public information, and you can compare it to very high cost of living cities, and our salaries sometimes in some instances are actually higher. And our program, if you were just to get healthcare to yourself, it's free for yourself as the resident. If you had a spouse, they just take it out of your paycheck in your pay period. They match 5% day one for your retirement accounts. um, Parking is free. You don't have to pay for parking. I know, and that's like it's crazy that I even say that. The fact that there's so many programs where you have to pay for parking is, to me, is insane. Like, you're going there to work to help people, save people, and you're like, nope, sorry, $600 a month just for parking here. That's insane to me. But it's very common, and so I have to say it, that's a positive. We get lunches every Wednesday during Journal Club. Other days, there are some extra days that they're like, oh, no, we're just going to have lunch because, just because, Lacey is like, oh, we have lunch today. Okay. But for sure, at least, Wednesday, you have lunch covered for you. Um, we do, one of the attendings hosts a party in her house in the beginning for the first years. And then there's also a bowling thing towards the end of the year around April. Sorry, I'm kind of going off topic and I was talking about the house thing. But a lot of us, it's very low cost of living. I bought a house. One of my co-residents bought a house. My third co-resident, she's renting because she did her intern year here, so she rented. So she's gonna rent. As far as I'm trying to think. Our chiefs right now, the chiefs that just graduated, one of them lived in Waco. They had a house in Waco, so not really, but one of them bought a house in Temple. The other one rented because they lived in Austin. Their family was in Austin mainly. I'm trying to think. And then the upcoming chiefs right now, there some are renting houses. Three of them are renting houses. One of them is renting apartment. And then the upcoming class, I believe, two have houses, two are renting.
That's
You can
great.
buy a house. You get that physician loan, zero down, zero PMI. Um, you know, it's very doable, even as a first year resident salary. Our salary is pretty good. Just go Baylor Scott and White Health. residency and put benefits and salary, and you'll see the breakdown. It's really nice. I love it. I mean, it's good. You can, always fight for more, but you can also just think and be grateful for what you have to. So
Yeah.
it's nice.
It sounds like your money goes farther in Temple than it would
Definitely.
in a bigger city.
Yeah,
Um,
you're not worried about traffic and you're not worried about paying for parking. So that $600 a month goes, elsewhere.
yeah, exactly. Is it necessary to have a car? It sounds like between sites probably is.
Um, yes, it's weird. Yes, you need a car. It is a small town slash city, um, but it's not to the point where it's like it's like downtown Houston where you're like I can get around with a scooter. Could you get around with a scooter? Yes. If you live in the apartment complex in front of the hospital, 100% you can get around with a scooter. Would you want to though? With the heat that's about to come, I wouldn't. Um,
Yeah. Um, so what's the breakdown between the single, married, having kids between the residents?
yeah. So most of us in Temple, I mean, it's a lot of people settled down here. So most of us are married or have a significant other, honestly. So a good amount of us have a significant other or married.
Does anyone have kids?
Let me see. Oliver has kids. He has or a kid. So he has his son, and so we'll see if we have more in the upcoming years. I know in the previous years there were like many resident kids, and a lot of the residents had kids. But I think for us, it's just for now it's just Oliver. Yeah, because one of our graduating chiefs, she had a daughter recently. I think in April. So
Well, that ties into my next question, which is paternity, maternity leave. I know that there are AMC guidelines you have to adhere to with the amount of leave you can take, but how supportive is your program with that kind of thing?
very, very supportive. Now, there is the ACGME requirement, and then there's the American Board of Dermatology. The ACGME says you are required, after July of 2022, you're required to give 6 weeks of paid paternity leave. That shouldn't affect or take away their PTO or anything. Now, some programs play around with it. They'll tell the resident, hey, you could use some of your sick days or sick leave, however amount of days you have, and then tack on a couple of weeks that won't affect your PTO. That's ACG required. But then when you look at all these different specialties, each specialty adheres to the board of dermatology, board of internal medicine, board of whatever you want to name. Each of those have their own strict, or not necessarily strict, they have their own regulations. How much can the resident miss? And so in the American Board of Dermatology, I believe in your span of 3 years of the residencies, because dermatology is 3 years, you can have up to 16 weeks. That's the max that you can be of leave. I don't know the do too much details about it. I think PTO does take into account. So like for us, we have 3 weeks of PTO. And so in the 3 years, I will take 9 weeks of PTO. Elective doesn't count because elective, you're doing it something educational, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so from my PTO, that's 9 weeks right there in the span of 3 years. So 9 minus 16, then I have 7 weeks. Now, if somebody wants to have two kids in residency, I mean, yes, your ACGME, you could, if you wanted to, take your full required 6 weeks, but then you're going to delay your graduation of residency. And that's not, discriminatory thing because yes, the ACGME gives you something, but then you also have to adhere to the board that you are trying to get board certified in. And so if somebody wants to have two kids in residency, then they really have to think about it. I have 7 weeks left, and you really can. Okay, what if you get sick? Can you really take sick days? And so you have to play around with it. You have to be a little malleable with it, honestly.
Okay, that makes sense, and that's probably similar across most programs.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, that makes sense. So let's kind of jump into the concluding questions. I have three concluding questions for
yeah.
you. Where can we find out more about your program?
On the website, doing away rotations. Park is very receptive. A lot of people email her, and she's just so good at, even if she doesn't reply in a week, she will eventually get to your email. She's very good at that. Um, the residents know everything, and I feel like I've shared more about this program that you can find anywhere. So watch YouTube video, follow the TAMU dig, do all that stuff. That's how you'll learn more about our program.
Perfect. Well, that's why we're doing this podcast, to try and
Yeah,
give people some more insider information.
yeah.
Um, so what advice do you have for medical students interested in dermatology?
I want to say start prepping your applications early, but keep your mind open. Your first semester, trust me, like people think, I did a decent amount of research, and this is why I didn't do a research here. But to be honest, my first research that I've done was like towards the second half of my M2 year. Research is not going to be the thing that sets you apart. Research is basically, to some people, just a checklist. What sets you apart is how, you know, how are you when you do your home rotation with your program? Who is this person when they're doing their away rotation? That's what's going to set you apart. You having 50 research, you having, I'd rather have somebody who's personable, very helpful in clinic, very efficient, gets along well with the MAs, with the attendings, with the residents, who has what, 5 publications or 10 presentations. That to me is a better applicant than somebody with 60 publications or 60 research. Because at the end of the day, you know, your personality is who you are. It's not your research who you are. Who you are in person is what matters more, not who you are in paper or on paper. And so that to me matters more. So like yeah, so like I tell a lot of them once that message me or text me or email me, hey, I'm looking for research. I'm like no, take a breath. You just got into med school. Focus on knowing, like, do you even know how to study yet? Because how you studying in undergrad is not how you study in med school. And so I'm like, no, learn how to study, learn how to learn, absorb that stuff. See if, see if you're doing well in your classes, see if you're passing your classes. Once you're comfortable, everybody in the beginning is not comfortable at all with med school. Some people get comfortable in 3 months. Some people take 9 months. For me, I would say the time I felt comfortable in med school, where I'm like, okay, I think I'm getting used to this, was in March. And that's 9 months in. That's when I'm like, okay, I feel like, I could enjoy my time without feeling guilty because I should be studying, I should be studying, I should be studying. That's when I felt comfortable. And that took me 9 months in. So don't stress about that stuff as an M1 when you're starting this summer or you're starting you know, in October and you're almost finishing your first semester. Like it's still like too early to tell, but keep an open mind. And so for an M2, if you're really thinking to do dermatology, start thinking about doing a home rotation when you can. Start obviously seeking out research opportunities when you can. As an M3, focus on your step two. I think step two still matters in some sense. And so make sure you get a decent enough grade so that way you don't get screened out. I'm not speaking for my program. I'm speaking as somebody who is in the admissions committee at Texas A&M. I'm speaking as somebody who's gone through the process. Um, there are programs, many programs that will screen people out, and that's the unfortunate thing. But that's also, you have 700 applicants. You can't interview all of them, and so you need a screener. It used to be step one and step two, and so focus on the step two. That's going to matter too. Focus on your rotation. That matters too. What they say in your rotation, that matters. Your personal statement matters. Your recommendation letters matter too. It's truly changed to now it's like you have to have these, but like now it's subjective. Like you need to have a good personal statement, you have to have good recommendation letters, and when you do your away rotations, you have to be just you have to get along with everybody. And so that matters more. Like I feel like we're thinking so objective, which is how dermatology was, and I don't blame us for thinking that, because dermatology was always step one, step two, top of your class AOA and all that stuff. That stuff matters to some extent now, but it's like now it's like who you are outside the paper is what matters more. Because if you don't have a good away rotation, that's why some people say away rotations are a double-edged sword. Would you had if you come to a program, they're like, I don't know, I just don't think he meshed well, or I don't know if they were a strong away rotator, and but like your application on paper is amazing, could you argue that this person had a higher likelihood of getting an interview to our program had he just not did an away rotation? I don't know. So it is a double-edged sword. So make sure when you go to your away rotations at other programs, work well. Do your home rotation first. That way you can get feedback from your program director and everything, and then do your away rotation. So that way you can at least try to shine your best to the away rotator and other institutions,
That's great advice. Thank you.
of course.
So last question, what advice do you have for choosing a program? What what things should people prioritize?
Yeah. So what are your what are your life goals? You need to sit down truly and reflect. What are your life goals? Do you want to be the next Bologna? Do you want to be the next Frederick Mose? Do you want to be the next, Schaefer? I think Dr. Schaefer is like a pediatric dermatologist. Who do you want to be? If that stuff is important to you, then yeah, you can, target those schools. There's nothing wrong with targeting, those heavy hitting institutions. What do you want from your life? Um, if you're more like, I want to go where, somewhere where I want to be happy or where I'm going to be happy, or what are your priorities? I will tell you my priorities when I applied is, am I going to be close enough to my family? Am I going to be close enough to where my community is? Do I like this program? Do I get along with these people? I'm spending 3 years here, and I'm spending more time with some of these people than my own wife because I'm spending so much time in the clinic. And so, do I like the people that I work with? That stuff is important because if you're at a place that you enjoy, 8 hours go by very quickly. But if you're at a place that you hate, 1 hour seems like 8 hours. So that's what you need to look for. Do you get along with the people? Do you like the faculty? Is the city good for you? Is the city good for you? Like, you got to ask yourself, like, you really see yourself living? The program could be great, but if you're secluded 8 hours from family, 8 hours from your spouse, 10 hours from the nearest whatever, like, could you really see yourself living here no matter how good the program is? Because also, mental health comes into play in that sense too. And so there's a lot of factors to look into it. And then you just write down, this is what I did. I sat down, I'm like, what do I want in a program? And look into everything, location, and curriculum, like how do, surgery or peds derm, or do I get exposure? Salary plays into play. You don't want to go somewhere and now you took loans in med school. Now you want to take loans in residency just to make ends meet. And there's some people, unfortunately, on the coasts that do that. They can't afford it. They have three roommates just to afford rent. I didn't want that. I was like, nope, I'm staying in Texas. So my thing was location, staying in Texas, preferably around my family, around my in-laws. And so write down. Nobody can tell you which program to go to. Only you know what program is best for you because only you know what your priorities are. There's some personal things that you can't share with anybody, that you're like, but this is important to me. Well, keep that in heart, keep that in mind, rotate. And if you find a program that fits that, then that's the program that you should target. Don't let this, name clout, big program thing. See, it's not, I've worked hard enough to get into dermatology. So it's like I tell people, this was my advice when step one. I guess step two is still, scored. So I tell people, you worked hard, got the AOA, got the step two score that you wanted, or even higher, did the research that you want. You did that to open all the doors. You having all that is not forcing you to go into the door that's, oh, prestige and dermatology and all that stuff. No, if you want to go into if you want to go to any other specialty, peds, family medicine, orthopedic surgery, anything that's, you can go there. Don't let people guilt trip you like, no, you have a high step score. You should definitely shoot for, this Ivy League school. You should definitely shoot for this. You have so much research. You should, no, like, you didn't do that to corner yourself to go to this big name place because you have all these high scores. You did that to open all the doors. And so you can choose which door you want to walk through. And that's what you should target, because only you know which door is going to make you the happiest. There are people, unfortunately, that choose the door because they're like, it's, there's a psychology term in the MCAT for it. Um, it's like, I've worked this hard. It feels like, my hard work is for nothing if I choose this because it seems less in the eye of academics. But it's not true. because at the end of the day, you having a good life is more important than you going somewhere just for the sake name and all that stuff. That's not worth it to me.
Well said. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Shalabi, for joining us today, for giving us your advice, and also for telling us a lot about your program. It's been great to have you.
Of course, thank you for having me, Jake. Yeah, I'm always happy to give back, especially to the DIG community. So if y'all have any questions, you can always reach out to them and they can always reach out to me too.
Sounds great.